You're listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Here, we hold space for real conversations at the intersections of parenting, spirituality, and justice. With each episode, we bring together experts, everyday parents, and advocates to explore how we can raise the next generation with purpose, intention, and love. So whether you're tuning in from a quiet moment of rest or in the middle of the beautiful chaos of family life, take a deep breath and let's journey together. Hello, everyone. My name is Nettie, and I'm a co-director for the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. And I'm so excited to have here with us today for our podcast, Barbara Lyon. Barbara is the Children's Ministry Director at City Church San Francisco. She's a mother of 3, and she is one of the most amazing creatives I've ever met. And I'm so excited we get to dive into this great conversation today and explore more about parenting, spiritual practices, all along the themes that we really are passionate about when it comes to our work. And so, Barbara, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Nettie. I'm very excited to be here and have this conversation.
Me too. To get us started, would you please introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners and tell us how long you've been a parent for?
Yes, thank you. I have been a parent for 16 years now. My oldest is 16, and then I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I have been parenting for a while. I'm a creative. I like to talk about creating. I like to create multiple things. I love storytelling in all its forms, which means TV, plays, movies, the whole thing, good songs, good music. And I really, really love children's faith formation. And that's what I do all the time. So that's a little bit about me. I'm always in between trying to spend time on creative endeavors and spend time on my family and my friends and getting into nature, all those things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it is exciting that you have such a passion for what children's faith formation looks like. And so, for those listening, when I got to meet you, Barbara, I was introduced to your work at City Church in San Francisco. And I was so drawn to what you do there because you bring in the contemplative approach to how we form our children in their faith. And that's something that I became interested in as a mother when I started having my children about 10 years ago. I was on a spiritual journey of asking questions about why I believed what I believed and feeling like there was something deeper that could help me not only know about God, but to experience God with my body, more of a embodied faith and not so much just a faith that memorized scripture or knew what the beliefs were. So all that to say, I started to explore the contemplative tradition within Christianity and was curious with learning about the contemplative tradition, how does this impact me as a parent? And how does this impact how I teach my kids about God? I would love to hear a little bit about what does a contemplative approach to faith formation look like with children from your experience?
Oh, yeah. To begin with, Nettie, we should probably define contemplative. And you and I, there are probably better people than you and I to define contemplative. But as far as I understand it, it's a way of having a non-dual mindset, like embracing a spread of mystery and unknowing. And for the kids at church, I would call it the wondering. So we just wonder. So that's what I think when I think contemplative. And Christian contemplation is a little bit of this emptying and unknowing with the awareness that God is there, like you're not alone in it. I would say that I was probably always a contemplative, maybe a little bit of a mystic, just because of my imagination and curiosity. I think it was always there. I think I became very aware of it when I started being a mom and having to care for bodies, the taking care of the bodies. The lesson of the bodies taught me a lot about what was there that I wasn't seeing and what I didn't know. And for the kids at church, it actually was very interesting because it came out of COVID. And in San Francisco, where I am, people live in apartments. And when COVID happened, the playgrounds closed. And so families were leaving in droves the first couple months. And our numbers fell drastically in the city. And what happened was that when we started coming back with the small numbers, we were able to do things that we couldn't do before. We had fewer children, and we were like, let's play a little bit, let's try these things. And so we started introducing some of these ancient Christian contemplative practices with the kids, which I know quite a few churches that do. And what we learned was a lot of them include words, and kids can't read. They're not comfortable with words. So we had to make them a little bit more body friendly and open to all intelligences. And the other thing that I became aware of was how white Christian contemplation is a very different thing from other cultures and ethnicities contemplation. So I began doing this deep dive for wisdom in like African American traditions, which teach us a lot about how contemplation is collective and out loud and verbal and not quiet and silent and alone, like a lot of we might think contemplation is. So that's been very interesting to me. And that also came out of COVID. Like, how do we teach people to be together again? We've done such a good job telling them that they can know God on their own. What does it mean to know God through each other? So, all of that is sort of my journey. And that is what put the name contemplation on what I was doing and what I knew. But I would say it started when I became a mom. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. That was really rich and helpful to hear how, when you became a parent and you were taking care of bodies, how that was very transformative with your desires, your perspective, your questions. And that is something that I think many of us parents can relate to is once we have another little body to take care of, we we are just wondering, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Especially when it's your first child.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's so daunting and sometimes you can feel like you don't even know where to begin. But what I love about what we're talking about is our bodies can tell us so much. And you were sharing how with children, they're not going to be reading words necessarily
Right.
depending on their age, but there's other ways of knowing. There's other intelligences, like you said. And so
It's valid.
yeah, and yeah, that are valid. And so I think that's a great starting place to think about with children being aware of what their bodies are experiencing, what their bodies are communicating, and as parents, helping our children realize maybe their embodied experience wouldn't be labeled as like a spiritual encounter for most people, but what we're learning is that our children have many spiritual encounters throughout the day.
Oh, yeah.
And we can build the awareness to help them name that and notice that and help our children become aware of how the divine is really present in every moment of our lives.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the thoughts I have with what you're sharing. And I'm thinking about for me, when I got introduced into the contemplative tradition, I remember one of my initial awakenings was I thought that being in the church building was like the most holy, sacred place. And that's where I would definitely be able to experience God's presence. Of course, I believe that I could experience God in other areas of my life, but it felt like a split. Like this is the holy church place. And then in my day-to-day life at home or at school, we're focusing on work, on tasks, on responsibilities. And we say our prayers at home but it just felt more like a split from what was sacred and what was secular. And so
Yes.
one of my early learnings with contemplative tradition was this awe that if I can just open up my heart and pay attention and listen deeply,
Yeah.
I can actually experience the beautiful presence and love of God in the mundane moments of my life.
Yes.
And that was really helpful for me as a parent with very young children. I was a stay-at-home parent for 6 years before I started seminary. And for most stay-at-home parents, you are just inundated with cleaning cleaning spills, wiping bodies, holding crying babies, doing the dishes, vacuuming, dusting, whatever it may be. And it's easy to feel like God isn't there when it's just so busy and tiring. And for many parents, feeling alone because there aren't other adults around you for most of the day.
Yes.
So, all that to say, that's how contemplative practices and learning about the contemplative tradition impacted me as a parent
Yeah.
was in the mundane moments of my life, I can learn how to open up my heart awareness
Yeah,
and be near and feel the nearness of God.
that's right.
So,
I love what you said about the separation between secular and like holy. And that for me was a big one. And that's what I mean, I think, by the non dual mindset is recognizing that everything can be holy at any moment, like there's a gradation. I distinctly remember, Nettie, I used to, before I had children, I was really great. I would prepare my heart for church on Sunday mornings. I would open my Bible, I would read a psalm, I would get ready emotionally to go to church and be in God's presence and all this stuff. And then I had children, and being in church just meant nursing fussy babies. And I was like, what the heck? I had to learn a completely new way of accessing God. And I was like, when is it going to happen? Because I knew I was really practiced in this one way of accessing God. And I had to learn. And then I just learned from what I had, like everything you're talking about, the preciousness of bodies. And I'll tell you, somebody, bless their heart, gave me a copy of Quotidian Mysteries, if you know this one, by Kathleen Norris. It's a great little book. It's called Quotidian Mysteries, Laundry, Liturgy, and quote, Woman's Work, unquote. And she does not have children, and it was not a mom when she wrote the book, but she talked about the sacredness of these daily tasks. And I just started reworking everything in my mind to try to make it a holy moment. So when I washed the dishes, I was like, there's so many things in this world that I can't scrub clean, but I can wash these dishes. There's so many things that I can't solve for my children, but I can wash their bodies. So everything you're saying, like kind of wringing the holy out of these ordinary tasks. And that really saved me. And I found God in lovely, ordinary places. And it was wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, it is wonderful. I think about how this is really a posture of being in our day to day. And it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of just being attuned to what's happening within ourselves. Something that I'm thinking of right now is a quote, and I wish I could remember where I heard it from. But the quote talked about how our truest self, our truest nature, is this awareness of the sacredness of all of life. And it's when we are distracted
Mm-hmm.
that we are focused on smaller parts of our lives. And I think it's interesting because maybe for many of us, we think what's normal as a human is to be focused on the tasks and the responsibilities and the desires and what some might call the ego state. Like, how are we trying to serve our needs? And so we think that this is the normal state as a human, is to check the email constantly, check things off the to-do list. And for me, to be close to God is like a very intentional, I need to get away from the world to be close to God and to feel rejuvenated spiritually. But with what I've been learning and this quote that I'm referring to, it changed the perspective. It's actually your truest state isn't to stay busy with all the tasks, but your truest state is actually to just
Yeah.
be in the presence of the sacred, to be in the presence of God in all of life and wonder of life, because our life is a gift and it's a miracle that we're even alive.
I
And
know who knows this really well, Nettie? Children. Children know this really well. And one of the things I've learned is that, yes, what you're saying, like they already have full access to God in this faith, but they just don't have the same walls and vehicles that we have put around it. So learning from them to pause and look at things and take a long time walking down a block and say hi to a neighbor. That's all good lessons that God is always with us. Yeah.
absolutely. I really love that you brought that up. It's a very important value to me as a parent, is to allow myself to learn from my kids and to allow myself to pause and pay attention to how my kids are behaving and just be with them and reflect back what they're doing and just being a kid again. It's like waking up the child parts within myself, because as a parent in our world today, we are, very focused on making sure our homes are safe, our kids are well, we have food on the table, bills are paid. Recently, there was an advisory on the mental well-being of parents and caregivers of children in our country. And it's a stressful time for many people. And so I love this reminder that as parents, we can pause and be intentional to learn from our children to notice what they're up to
Yeah.
and to allow that to teach us and bring us back to that childlike faith where there's this wonder and this trust and this gratitude just to be alive. I'm thinking about my toddler. He just turned 2, and he makes me laugh because he absolutely loves to just have skin to skin contact, of course. And what he'll do is he will find a way to put his little face somewhere on my arm. Even sometimes he'll sit close to me and then he'll get close and he'll gently pull up my shirt so that he can put his face on my tummy. And he just wants that skin contact. And I'll look at him and think, okay, what else? What else do you need? What can I help you with? But he just wants to be there, skin to skin. He just wants his little face either
Lovely.
on my arm, on my chest, or on my tummy, and just to be there. And he just sits there with that skin to skin contact. And then maybe 30 seconds later or a minute later, then he'll just get off and go about to his next thing. And I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, I love that too. I have one kid who still is a pretty good snuggler, but the other two, I have to take my physical contact where I can get it. But what I love about that, Nettie, is you are creating something that is true and real. Like you are something that holds for your son. So they can get the skin to skin contact, and that's spiritually forming, and they don't even know it. And they'll look back and be like, oh, yeah, this is what love feels like. So good job. Well done. I'm I'm listening to you, Nettie, and you sound like a much more gracious parent than I am. You sound like you're much better at it. I would
It's not
say
true. It's not true.
I would say when I became a mom, I thought I would be really good at it because I was a very good babysitter. I was 11 when my little sisters were born and they were twins, and I took care of one of them. Mom took care of the other. I was really good at changing diapers, watching kids, putting them to sleep, bathing them, the whole thing. And then I became a mom, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was like deep end. I still remember when the midwife came on like day 4 to check on us at the house and was like, "Why is he crying?" And I was like, "I like you're the midwife. You don't know why he's crying?" And they were like, "Oh, is he fussy? Is it time to eat?" And I was like, "I don't know. You don't know. I don't know." And it occurred to me that I was the mom and that I was the one who was going to be being asked about this child for the rest of his life as if I knew him the best. And that freaked me out so much. And I would say that I was in a deep contemplative state, that is, a deep state of unknowing. Like I had no idea. Very quickly, I was out of my depth and I needed so much help. I just remember internet searching everything. I remember internet searching, like, how do I bathe the baby? How do I know when he's fussy? How do I know anything? I was just trying to get as much information as I could. But I think all parents get to a point of unknowing at some point. And I think it's just a true state. Like, I think we honestly don't know. Our kids are a mystery. They should always remain a mystery. We should never assume that we know who they are, especially now as teenagers. They're starting to get to the point where they know more about themselves than I do. There are these secret worlds and hopes and dreams that I am hoping to be let into access to. Whereas up to now, I've been able to tell them more about themselves than they know about themselves. But now they're telling me things about themselves they don't know. They're also, Nettie, telling me things about myself that I am not aware of. So that's what's happening right now. But this deep unknowing is very true. And I still tell my children, like, I don't know. I'm making the best decision I know how, but this is the first time I've had a 14-year-old daughter who wants to do this activity, and I'm making the best decision that I know how. And if I'm wrong, I'll apologize later.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm making a connection in my mind about what it looks like to be able to lean into the unknown and not be afraid of that.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we feel like we have to have certainty. We get attached to this like certainty in our lives. We know this is true. We know this is how things should be because maybe it makes us feel more safe. But I think when you can lean into what the contemplative tradition can offer us is this peace in what we do not know.
Yeah.
And there's actually a spiritual freedom that you can experience when you're willing to surrender that. Yeah. And to trust.
It's like spiritual freedom and also like need, because you just don't know. Like you need lots of help. I remember when they were little, like things coming out of my mouth that my parents had said. And the lesson of the bodies when you have children, it's amazing. And you're never going to get it again in your life. It's one of the most extraordinary things to go through to be a parent because you learn about growth, you learn about bodies, you learn everything that you've been carrying in like familial trauma, family of origin, culture. If you have a partner, then you're learning about them all the time. So there's this constant influx of like new information. And I remember at one point something was coming out of my mouth and I was like, I don't think my parents did this really well. I want to do it differently, but I don't know how. And this isn't something that's like in a parenting book that I can look up. I don't remember what it was. But I remember beginning to wonder at that point, how does God parent? Because I took it for granted that God is the perfect parent. So I did this activity in a class that I did with parents, and I was like, how is God the perfect parent? And the adults were like, smite and wrath. And I was like, okay, we need to talk about who God is, and maybe we need to adjust who we think God is. But I remember I started, one of the things that changed for me is I realized that God doesn't always give us the answers to the questions we ask. Sometimes the questions we ask, the answer is, this is who I am, or don't forget I love you. So I started using that with my children. They would say, so and so has a bigger piece than me, they have more snack. And I would look at them and I would say, do I love you? I love you so much. Am I going to take care of you? Yes. And that seemed to answer the problem. And so since then, I've been excavating like, what is it? How does God actually parent in the Bible? So that's a big wondering of mine that I've had since then. And it did come from a deep need, like a chasm of need, which, yeah, is why I'm a Jesus follower because I do. I need this wondering and this faith.
Yeah, that's very honest, very real. I've heard other stories that are so similar, and I resonate with that in my own experience. There was a deep unknowing and deep need to
Mm-hmm.
find help as a parent, as a new parent. And I similarly started to wonder and explore, what does God as a loving parent look like? Because, yeah, God is a loving parent in the scriptures. And I realized, oh, when I have my tantrums, my adult tantrums, when I'm just totally enmeshed in my emotion, having a really hard time, I experience that God is present, God is compassionate, God is loving, and God's going to be with me to get me through this. In my faith journey, I guess there was an evolution of how I connected with God, but recently I really could trust and feel that God was with me. And
Yeah,
God wasn't necessarily controlling my actions or controlling what decision to make. God would guide me and God was with me. And that did impact how I wanted to show up for my kids. And so I'm thinking about how the contemplative practices within the Christian tradition that I learned about, some of them were breath prayers, Lectio Divina, the examine practice, the compassion meditation. Some of these practices, they started to help me get more of an ability and enhance my capacity, my heart capacity
hmm,
to hold space with love and compassion. And so as you were sharing, I thought it's so true that what our kids experience when they're coming to us with their problems or their hardships, we have an opportunity to hold the space with love and compassion and help them discover that God's wisdom lives in them.
that's right.
They don't have to always get an answer from an outside source, and parents don't always have the right answer. But what we can do is be present with them and help them discover what's within themselves, because I believe that the divine lives in every single one of us, and the divine lives in my children. And so that's where my thoughts were going as you were sharing, is God is a loving parent. And this is a great place for a lot of parents and caregivers to begin, is how do I understand and know God as a parent in my life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think we already know how to do what you're talking about, build like knowledge autonomy in like science and facts. When the kids go through the why phase, at some point you're like, I don't know. We got to look it up. We'll find a book at the library. We'll ask somebody. But faith somehow feels different, like you should have all the answers. But the truth is, you can frequently reach a point very quickly with children where you're like, I don't know. In our children's worship program, we frequently say the Bible doesn't tell us that, which is it was a very interesting thing for me to learn how to say. The Bible doesn't tell us what
Mhm.
the people thought at this point or what God was thinking, but the Bible does tell us that they were provided for or that God felt this way at the end. So that leaning into the I don't know also in faith and saying things like, yeah, that's a question a lot of adults have. And also recognizing that it's not bad. Like they are going to have to build the muscles of wrestling with God. You want them wrestling with God and asking questions because that's how you build muscles and habit. And you hear things like, I'm safe to wrestle with. So the more they start learning those muscles early, especially in the context of a loving and safe home where those questions are honored, the more muscle they will have to keep holding on and wrestling throughout their lives. Yes.
Yeah, that's really rich, really good stuff. At this point, I'm wondering if there's maybe two or three practices or pieces of advice that you've learned along the way in your journey that you could offer for our community. Maybe what are a couple go-to practices or phrases or
That's
things that
great. Yeah.
you've noticed have supported you as a parent?
I love a good script. Give me a script. Learning how to apologize. So saying sorry and I don't know. Those are good. I lean into that. God is a parent. We talked about that. In children's ministry, we use finger labyrinths to pray. And in the middle, how we word it is so a finger labyrinth, for those who don't know, it's just a small little labyrinth with a maze that has a little divot cut out where you can trace the path. And we talk about asking God questions on the way in. And then in the middle, you rest with God. You take 3 deep breaths and remember that the whole, like, entire Trinity is with you, even as before you get answers, even before God answers, or just remember that God is with you, even in all of your questions. And that has been very impactful for me. I call it the holy pause. And I take many throughout my day where I just take a deep breath and remember that before I have the answers or before I know how to respond to this question or this statement, God is with me. So I recommend that. I would say imbibe the lesson of the bodies for yourself also. Remember that you are a body and to be fierce and be an agent of resurrection in your house to wring everything you can out of everything. When you fold clothes, remember that you are folding clothes for precious bodies. When you bathe yourself, remember that you are a precious child of God. When you cook, remember that you're feeding people for good work in the world. So I anything that you touch your hands, if you approach it with a holy and a wondering, what can this show me about the world or God? Because God is to be found in the ordinary. And God does this for us. If you look at Jesus in the Bible, Jesus feeds, Jesus washes, Jesus serves up a meal. So breaks his body for us as we break our body for our children. So just look and see what these practices, what you're already doing is teaching you if you're open to it. So that would be probably what I would say.
I love that. What you're already doing is
Yeah.
teaching you.
Yeah.
And that is so beautiful to realize that our spiritual experience, our faith begins with our body.
Yeah.
You can just
Right.
start right there. You can start right there. And there's a lot of comfort that I feel when I think about it that way. And I really appreciate your offering of the holy pause. We live in the information age. We can so easily research anything on our phones, on our computers to get information, to get answers.
Mhm.
And taking a holy pause or many holy pauses throughout our day helps us remember that part of experiencing the fullness of life is to just be
Mhm.
and to be still and to wait.
Yeah.
I really have noticed that when I can be still, I can see how other relationships and how the spirit is moving in my life and how love is moving in my life. And things are happening that I don't have to control, and it's taking those holy pauses
Yeah.
to just be and experience that I am being held in this life.
Yeah.
I don't have to hold life on my own terms or with my own hands. I am being held. I think those are great and powerful practices and reminders for us as parents and caregivers of children today. I really appreciate you sharing those.
Yeah, I have been having this image lately, Nettie, of so the images that I've been having of God lately, my brain has lots of images, but the images I've been having lately have been very maternal, like a mother God figure. And there's a lot of nursing women in my life right now, and watching them breastfeed their children and thinking when I wake up in the middle of the night of a God who is there ready to just nourish me and give me everything I need without question. That's really changed my waking hours that are happening more that I'm getting older. But so, yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful, the images. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're making me think about how sometimes I ask my children a question, where do you see God in this story? Or if we're out walking in a park, where do you see God in this park? Just to see what their imaginations and their hearts will respond in that moment. And there was one Christmas, my 4-year-old at the time, we were reading the story about when Jesus was born.
Yes.
And I remember asking her after that story, I said, so where do you see God in this story? And she replied, in the mama's face.
Mm,
And it really touched me. It really touched me. And she said, the mom loves her baby.
yeah.
And I said, yeah, that is a beautiful place to see God in this story. And that's just one example of our ability as parents to open up, to see God in the ordinary, to see God in the places that we aren't usually taught to see God in, to be thankful for our bodies. I once heard that our bodies are a gift because we can feel love because of our bodies.
Mm,
And that's something I do like to share with my children. And I also love to go back to what you said earlier, the practice as parents to offer apologies.
yeah.
The very first time I tried to apologize to my toddler, my first child,
Yeah.
she was a toddler, and it was so hard to get the words "I'm sorry" out. It was really hard for me.
Yes.
And I remember feeling that hesitation within myself, and I thought, wow, this is challenging to say I'm
Mm,
sorry to my young child.
yeah.
That was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And today, with practice, there is just so much more of this ability to let love flow
Yeah.
because we are human. We do make mistakes. We act out of our emotions when we don't want to. That happens. And I'm learning the power of having that strength, which I call strength and willingness and humility to say, I messed up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And we are modeling something powerful to our children
Yeah.
that love always has the power to repair. And we always have the ability to make things right because love is eternal, love is infinite, love is all around us. And we believe in our tradition that God is love. And so there's just a lot of hope, I think, for us parents today, really taking seriously how we pass on the faith to our children. There's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity for us to continue to build our support for one another, build this community, to help each other, to learn new ways of sharing faith and spiritual practices to our children as, we're living in rapidly changing times.
Yeah. I would say that a couple things are coming up for me. One is that the muscle for apologizing really comes in handy when they're teenagers. So keep exercising it. It's good. It's also very disarming. It takes you out of a competition and into a relationship. So, very key. I'm also thinking of the story with people bringing their children to Jesus, right? Passage says, one of my favorites, because I'm a children's ministry pastor. The children, it says, let the children come, which implies this like already coming motion. So remembering that our children are already coming to God, that God loves our children more than we do, and that God is coming to them all the time through their bodies and everything around them, including your love and your attention. Then the other statement in the story is do not hinder them, which I love. because we put things on our children or our faith tradition. So maybe you're wounded by faith and don't know how to pass on faith to your children if it has been something that you have had to unlearn or unburden yourself from. So this idea of taking off what was put on top of you that hindered you from coming to God and coming to Jesus, and also not laying anything extra on top of your children to hinder them and tell them this is the right way or not, which really is very freeing. You don't have to teach them faith. You really have to get out of the way a little bit and let them go to Jesus and let them learn. And then the other thing to remember about faith heritage is that your children already have one just because of what you believe and where you've been through. As much, even if you want to give them like a brand new slate, they still are carrying what you know about God in their DNA, just like they carry some of the familial trauma, some of the familial stories in history. They're going to carry some of your faith. So you can be really honest at an age appropriate level about, like, this is what happened. This is how I know God. This is what works for me. How do you know God? What do you know? When do you talk to God? Do you talk to God in bed at night like I do? Yeah. So I think I like the idea also for myself of identifying what has been laid on top of my initial faith and peeling it off and trying to get to this little Barbara underneath, and how little Barbara knew God and what held her and what made her stay here and keep doing this work and raising children in the faith also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very beautiful to think about how we pass on our faith is actually by letting go a little bit, taking
Yeah.
a step back a little bit. It's not always on us to impose or make certain that certain things are said and done.
Right.
We actually have an invitation to trust, to observe, to pay attention, to listen. And that's actually really cool to think about. Like, oh, I don't have to work harder. I actually just have to be more
Right.
present and more
It's
willing to
also
notice.
terrifying. It's also terrifying, Nettie, because the biggest, most terrifying thing about it is my children are not going to know God the way I know God. They're going to know God in a different way. And their wounds and healings are going to be different than my wounds and healings. And what held them is going to be different than what held me. So it's like, it's also terrifying. And especially with teenagers, sometimes I'm like, feel like I'm holding onto the robes of Jesus saying, this better work. Like, this better work. I am banking that how I raise my children gives them something that supports them through their lifetime. But yeah, terrifying, and
Mhm.
freeing all at the same time. It's a
Yeah.
crapshoot. Parenthood is a crapshoot, Nettie. And you know what? You don't really need to work on transforming your child because life will do it to them, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's going to have heartache. Everybody's going to have moments of loneliness, of feeling persecuted. Yeah, everybody's going to have moments where God can speak into them, and allowing that to happen, and noticing as a parent, like, you can't help but be the primary spiritual caregiver of your child because you are there when all these things happen. You are there, which is also terrifying, Nettie.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so true that we don't often say that in our dominant culture, that we are like the primary spiritual care provider for our children because day to
There,
day.
because we're there.
Are we aware of that? Are we ready for that? And that is a huge role to play. And it's an honor to have that role, to not see it. It is very like intimidating or terrifying. And at the same time, it's like, wow, this is how I get to contribute to our world, is through the way I show up for my children. And so as you share about how it can be so terrifying and how we are going to see the spirit form our children in their own unique ways, in their own unique journeys, it won't look just like ours.
That's right.
I'm thinking about how what we do model to our children,
Yeah.
whatever we choose to do in our day-to-days that help us. For example, every morning on the way to school, I recite a gratitude prayer to start the day.
Mhm.
So that's something that I do. I model it to my children.
Beautiful.
And I'm learning, I don't have to impose it on them. I don't have to force them to do it. They're just seeing me do it. And when they are willing and ready, they will join me in the gratitude prayer. But as they grow older, they might not go to the gratitude prayer. It might look different for them. Or they might love the gratitude prayer and they might do that as they grow older too. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that We can model to our children our practices, what helps us connect. They might enjoy that in their own lives. They might totally go a different direction and do other things. But I think there's just this comfort in knowing that we can we can model to our children our faith and just allow it to be an invitation, really. We can allow it to be an invitation for them, and they'll remember that. They'll remember what we do most consistently. It's
Right.
going to be ingrained in their memory as they grow. And there's something I think powerful about that, that
Yeah.
that's the legacy that we can pass down. And not so much that our children will act just like us, but they'll remember it and they might even creatively transform the way those practices look as they grow older.
Yeah. And also, if it's like sincere, if it's honest and it's couched in love, and then the other image that they get to see is you growing, right? Our kids get to see us grow. Thank goodness my kids don't remember the first 5 years of being a mom because I was a disaster. I kind of had my feet under me by the time they emerged into memory. But if they can say, I saw my mom grow and that God helped her through these hard times, like that is also a great lesson that they can take with them. And it's a long game. I even in children's ministry, I'm like, how many, like, I don't remember any stories I heard in children's worship when I was growing up. I just remember knowing them. I just remember knowing them, all of them. And so I think about that in my work and with my children. What will be spiritually impactful that I don't even know? And is it going to be when they have teenagers a zillion years from now? Are they going to be like, oh, yeah, my mom did this thing. And now I'm going to start doing the gratitude prayer in the car because I've got kids who need to hear a gratitude prayer. So you never know when it's going to come back.
Yeah,
Well, it's a
that's,
long game. It's a crapshoot, Nettie. It's a crapshoot.
it is. Oh my gosh, what a wild ride. Parenting is a wild ride.
I don't think it ends either. I don't think it ends. I
Yeah, I don't
I
think it ends either.
don't think it ends. I think I'm going to be praying. I'm going to be worried about them out there in the world, I think, and then I'm going to be worried about their spouses and praying for spouses, and then I'm going to be worried about grandkids. Like it's just their work. I'm going to be worried about. I don't think it stops. I think I'm tied to these human beings forever. Yeah.
Yep, I think you're right. I think you're right. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Barbara. I feel really grateful for your time and just giving us some more insight on what faith formation looks like for you, what you've learned about it along the way, and being able to share just at different stages of parenting. You know, when you have young children, there's a lot of new things, a lot of learning. And then when you have teenagers, there's new things you're learning.
But you're stronger. You're
But you're
stronger because
stronger
you've been
and
doing it. That's right.
you're stronger and you're growing. And I love that you reminded us that it is so powerful and beautiful for our children to see us grow.
That's right.
I really love that reminder, and I will hold on to that most certainly. So, thank you again. Is there anything that we can do as a community to support the work that you're a part of?
My work is the faith formation of children. I think we've covered most of it. Let them come, do not hinder them. Say, I don't know. You can, and oh, this is the tip that I want to give you, which I think you and I have talked about already. Tell them stories. Just tell them stories. There's a lot of great devotionals where you have to read the Bible, but really there's nothing like putting those stories in your own words, in a mama's words, in a papa's words, in a Tia's words, whatever it is. Put the stories in your own words, and that includes your heart stories, where God was there for you, how you were brave on the playground, how you befriended somebody who was lonely or somebody befriended you. Those heart stories and the stories, your heart will automatically filter which Bible stories are meaningful to you and what might be meaningful to your children and the age range that they need to be shared at. Just tell stories.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. I remember you sharing that with me, the power of storytelling at a very young age. Even if you have, an infant, you
That's
can
right.
already practice storytelling. And as my kids grow, I'm noticing they're very interested to know stories about my life. Like, oh, wait, what did you do, mom? What happened? And just seeing those as opportunities to show them what we've learned along the way, how God showed up in our lives, and it helps them be more able to see how God is showing up in their life too, right? So tell stories, lots of stories in many ways and forms. I lean into picture books with my young children. I love picture books, storybook Bibles, and what you said, tell the story also in your own words,
Yeah.
from your heart space. How would you retell this story and what does it mean? And those are great opportunities. I've mentioned to you before that I've attempted with my 4 young children to sit around the living room area and read a storybook from the Bible, a Bible story. And it can be chaotic with my 4 little ones. They're jumping, screaming, hitting each other, not ready to really tune in. But with the consistency of, whether it's a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, we choose one of our weekend mornings to just sit in the living room, open up a story Bible, and just be with the story. And the consistency over time is helping my kids see, like, oh, this is something we do. Oh, well, at
Yeah.
some point, my kids were like, oh, so wait, oh, I remember this story. Oh, yeah, I remember the 3 men that went into the fiery furnace, but then there was a fourth person. It was an angel. And, just whatever stories come up, I'm staying encouraged with just the consistency of the practice and letting it be as it is, trusting that as my kids hear me retell the story, because I do share that, and so does my partner Isaiah, we'll retell the story in our own words and kind of share, oh, wow, did you notice that? That was kind of interesting, or that was cool. Over time, my kids are learning to engage the stories in their own ways and are more interested. So to not give up, keep telling the stories and just see how the journey unfolds. So thank you for that. That was great.
And it works because it feeds you too. You're doing a practice that feeds you too. So you can be like, here's access to something that feeds me as well. Yeah, they come back in weird ways. My son had a friend in 4th grade whose older brother ran away from home. And this kid who was a friend was crying on the playground. And my little son went up to him and put his arm around him and didn't know what to say. So he told the story of a lost sheep, and he told the story of a lost son who came home and was embraced by his father. And that's what my son knew how to comfort him. And the friends stopped crying and they hugged each other and they went back to playing. And the older brother came back that night. But I was like, okay, like I wasn't even sure if he would have known those stories or remembered them, but they came back to him when he needed them. And that is kind of what I'm banking on, that everything I'm doing is going to come back when they need it. And anything that they don't need is just going to go away. So,
Mm, that is so amazing. Amazing to hear that. That's incredible to think of a 4th grade child able to tell those stories that came to him in that moment, which is such a spiritual thing. I mean, God, Holy Spirit brought that story up in that moment for that purpose of comforting his friend. And that's an amazing encouragement and reminder for all of us. So thank you.
not alone. We're not alone, Nettie.
That's right. We're not alone. That's right. Oh, I love that. We can also be fed. When we are attempting to feed our family and feed our children spiritually, we are also able to receive and be fed within ourselves. And that is something I have noticed in my experience. Yeah. I feel like I could keep going, but I'll probably take a pause here. Thank you again. This was really great. This was wonderful. I can't wait to be able to hear what other listeners are inspired by from listening to this conversation and to just keep going on this journey. We're going to keep growing and keep learning more day by day.
That's right. We have no choice. It's a day by day. We have to keep going tomorrow. So
That's right. Well, thank you, Barbara.
thank you, Nettie. This was fun.
You've been listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. We hope today's conversation offered you a moment of connection, a spark of insight, or simply a reminder that you are not alone on your parenting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone in your village. Together, we're building a more inclusive future, one conversation and one child at a time. For more information about the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project, visit us at inclusiveparents.org or follow us on social media at radically.inclusive.parents.